Let's stop with the rank partisanship. The President of the United States of America has just pardoned people who physically attacked, violently led to the death of officers like Sicknick, and we should be talking about that.
So I don't think enough Americans realize just how much Joe Biden abused his presidential pardoning powers. Of course, we all know that he pardoned his son Hunter after Hunter's conviction, even though he had swore up and down and lied to the American people that he wouldn't pardon Hunter. We all know that. But then there's also the fact of these preemptive pardons. Joe Biden pardoned a group of people preemptively, including 5 of his own family members in his last day in office. And you know what? That's unheard of. That's unheard of. The only time preemptive presidential pardons have been issued in the past was when Gerald Ford preemptively pardoned former President Richard Nixon, which, think what you want about that. But if ever there was a case to be made for preemptive pardoning, it's probably a man who served this nation as president. I certainly understand the arguments against offering that preemptive pardon. I do. But again, I can at least see the case for it. Joe Biden didn't preemptively pardon any former presidents. No, he did it to a group of people, including 5 of his own family members. And then Jimmy Carter came into office and he pardoned anyone who had dodged the draft. And, both of these presidents, when they did these pardons, Ford and Carter, they said that this was for national unity. And I do understand that argument. I'm sorry, pardoning 5 of your family members preemptively, that's not for any national unity, okay? That's for you. That's for your own family. And it suggests absolute guilt, okay? And of course, when Trump was talking about preemptively pardoning people at the end of his first term, the media had a full-on meltdown.
Have you ever heard of somebody getting a preemptive pardon who was innocent of all crime? Who's just an innocent person? Have you ever heard of that? Just somebody getting a blanket pardon and they're an innocent person?
But no, it's the president's own family. It's people that have been covering up for the president in addition to his own family.
Is there an innocent explanation for someone to seek preemptive pardons for family members? Would you do that if you knew you were innocent and just worried about outside forces?
The answer to that is going to be no. If you haven't done anything wrong, you sit there and go, what do you need a preemptive pardon for?
If he pardons people preemptively, he's essentially telling the public that these people have committed crimes. And we may not be aware of what they are, but the pardon is clear evidence that crimes have been committed.
I imagine if he decides to issue these preemptive pardons, it will be cast in a way that he is protecting his family and protecting their reputations from, villainous exterior forces that are against him.
First off, we should just take a deep breath and acknowledge the audacity of a president who's so clearly concerned about his own criminal culpability and that of his family members that pardons are a major obsession with him.
The idea of a kind of prospective pardon, this sort of permanent federal get-out-of-jail-free card, that seems to be what we're talking about in the case of this, right, with Giuliani and his 3 eldest children who, as far as we know, have not been convicted of a crime. Maybe they've committed a lot. And they don't want to face action. I don't know. It's weird. I wouldn't ask for a pardon. I don't think I deserve one because I don't think I've done anything criminal. But where does that come from? That concept that you can just kind of wave your magic pardon wand.
We have Tish James. We have Xavier Becerra. Mimi Rocha is literally my DA in my town. There will be opportunities to prosecute these people regardless if they abuse the pardon power as they are thinking.
Hopefully, Ellie, there will be a skyfall on this entire crime family, and there will be another day for them to die.
The president does indeed pardon, let's say, Rudy Giuliani or any members of his family. Would you see that, and I asked Preet Bharara this question, as essentially an admission of guilt?
I certainly would view it that way. I think millions of Americans would view it that way. If there was no belief in criminality, why would he think a pardon was necessary?
Okay. And then there's the fact that Biden offered a record number of presidential clemency acts. Clemency can be anything from pardoning to commutation to reprieve. He did a record number. He did more in a single term than most presidents do in 2 terms. And of course, you will hear the media frame this as if it was all 1,500 non-violent offenders. You know, it's just some kind of like racial justice, civil rights thing, justice is served. These people weren't violent, they've done their time. But actually, if you look at the cases and you look a layer deeper, a lot of them were violent. And we're going to get into that in a moment. But the last thing that I want to say is there's only two reasons why you offer a preemptive presidential pardon. Either the person's guilty and you know it, but you just don't want everyone else to know it, or our justice system is broken and it's become heavily politicized. And neither is a good look for Biden and for his legacy and for the Democrats. Either Biden is knowingly pardoning guilty people, not a good look, or our justice system is broken. And who broke it? Well, the Democrats, who went after their political opponents and persecuted them. So these Biden-Harris, the entire administration, Democrats writ large, they spent 4 years telling us the justice system is not broken. The justice system works. No one is above the law. And then you come out and you have these preemptive pardons of multiple people, including 5 of your own family members. That does not suggest that no one is above the law. It does not suggest that actually our justice system is not broken. Again, either these people are guilty or our justice system is broken. There's no other way about it. And in fact, taking these pardons, it really is a tacit admission of guilt. The better thing for Liz Cheney or Dr. Fauci to have done would have been to see if you get investigated, see if you get charged, see if you have to go to trial, and fight it and win. Because after all, our justice system isn't broken, right? After all, you didn't commit any crimes, right? That would have been the better thing to do. Why do you need a preemptive presidential pardon if you didn't do anything wrong and in fact you haven't even been investigated or charged? But now let's get to the reality of who Joe Biden actually pardoned, which was shocking to me. I knew it was bad, but actually going into this and delving deeper, it's bad. We keep hearing about how Donald Trump is so evil because he pardoned 1,500 January 6 defendants, including people who allegedly attacked cops. But no cops died on January 6th. But Joe Biden actually did pardon cop killers. So first we have Leonard Peltier. He is a Native American activist. He was part of the American Indian movement that fought against racism and police brutality. And in 1975, he killed 2 FBI agents who had come onto the reservation to investigate something else. And he was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms because of that. Now, in 1979, he escaped from federal prison in a very violent manner, not surprisingly, that involved a shootout involving him and prison employees, and one of the other would-be escapees died because it was so violent. And Peltier remains unremorseful. He has always proclaimed his innocence. Following his apprehension in Canada months later, he said that had he known the law enforcement officers were approaching to arrest him, he would have, quote, blown them out of their shoes. This man is unremorseful. In fact, former FBI Director Christopher Wray wrote a letter to Biden on January 10th of this year, begging Biden to not offer any clemency to Peltier. Wray said, quote, "It would be shattering to the victims' loved ones and undermine the principles of justice and accountability that our government should represent." He went on to state, "Peltier is a remorseless killer who brutally murdered 2 of our own special agents, Jack Kohler and Ronald Williams." It's worth noting that these 2 agents, they were only 27 and 28 years old, respectively. And it's also an interesting tidbit that in 2020, Peltier ran for vice president of the United States from prison. He ran on the Party of Socialism and Liberation ticket before he had to drop out of the race in August of that year due to health concerns. If killing 2 cops isn't enough, then probably being a socialist should be enough. Biden decided to commute this man's sentence. That's not the only cop killer that we have. We also have Terrence Richardson and Ferone Claiborne. Biden commuted their life sentences in connection with the 1998 killing of police officer Alan Gibson, who had an 8-year-old daughter at the time. And Biden's own U.S. attorney advised the White House not to commute these sentences because these were violent offenders, but Biden didn't listen. And he went ahead and pardoned multiple people who murdered cops. And again, as I said a little bit earlier, you keep hearing the media frame this as Biden commuted non-violent drug offenders' sentences. But again, if you look a layer deeper in some of these cases, you realize that they're not nonviolent. Here is one such case, Adrian Peeler, who didn't murder any cops, as far as we know, but he was convicted for the 1999 murder of Leroy Brown, who was 8 years old, and also Leroy's mother, Karen Clark. Now, Leroy and his mother, Karen, were set to testify the following month in another murder trial. And who was on trial? Well, none other than Adrian Peeler's brother, who had allegedly murdered Karen, the mother's boyfriend. Now, apparently there was only one witness to these murders, and somehow Adrian Peeler beat the murder and capital felony raps. He was convicted of the lesser charge of conspiracy to commit murder, again, in the case of the murder of 8-year-old Leroy Brown and his mother. In 2021, Adrian Peeler finished the 25 years that he was sentenced for the conspiracy to commit murder, but he had also been sentenced simultaneously to 35 years for dealing large amounts of crack cocaine. So when he was done with that other sentence in 2021, he still had 10 years to go. But Joe Biden commuted that drug sentence, and then the media tells us, oh, this is a nonviolent drug offender. Well, that's not true. This man more than likely murdered an 8-year-old boy and the 8-year-old boy's mother in order to protect his brother. Here's another example of it looks nonviolent on paper, but again, that's not all she wrote. Biden commuted the sentence of a woman who's known as the Black Widow, Josephine Gray. In 2002, Gray was sentenced to 40 years in prison after being convicted of insurance fraud relating to the deaths of 3 men who just so happened to be 2 of her ex-husbands and also another lover of hers. Now, she is highly suspected of having murdered all 3 men. In fact, she was initially charged with murder, but she was convicted on federal insurance fraud, and she avoided a separate murder trial when her attorney argued that she's probably going to die in prison anyway because she was 55 at the time and she had just been given a 40-year sentence. But it is widely believed that she herself killed them so that she could then collect insurance money on their deaths. And while they were investigating, authorities found voodoo items like dolls with needles in them in Josephine's residence. So again, this is another example of the Biden White House hiding behind non-violent offender, because on the surface, that's what it looks like. Insurance fraud, yeah, non-violent. But again, go a layer deeper, a lot of these people are not non-violent. Now, remarkably, Joe Biden also offered clemency to 37 federal death row inmates out of 40, which means that these 37 people, they're no longer facing federal execution. They are now going to spend their lives in prison without the possibility of parole. But when you hear who these people are and what they did, it's remarkable that Joe Biden did this on his last day in office. One of them is Jorge Avila Torres, who in 2005 raped and murdered 2 little girls, Laura Hobbs and Crystal Tobias, who were 8 and 9 years old, respectively. He also strangled to death Naval Officer Amanda Snell. He snuck into her bunk, tied her hands to the headboard, and then he strangled her with her laptop cord. And Joe Biden decided that this man doesn't need to face execution. Another man that he took off of death row in his last hours in office was Darrell Lawrence. In 2005, Darrell Lawrence shot and killed who? Oh, a police officer in Columbus, Ohio. His name was Brian Hurst, and this was during an attempted robbery. So why did Biden commute this man's sentence? Why did he decide that this man deserves mercy, even though he didn't offer mercy to police officer Brian Hurst? He senselessly and selfishly shot at him and took his life because he wanted to get some money. Why? Why did Biden decide that? He also commuted the sentence of death row inmate Meyer Brown. In 2002, Meyer Brown walked into the post office, asked for some money orders, and when the postal worker by the name of Sally Gaglia, when she had her back turned, Meyer decided it would be a good idea to jump over the counter, and then he allegedly tripped and fell into Sally, the postal worker, and cut her with his knife. And later, Meyer told police that at that point, he decided he had to kill Sally because she knew who he was. So he proceeded to stab her 10 times, and then he stole almost $2,000 worth of money orders. Biden decided that this person does not deserve execution. Instead, they deserve to spend the rest of their life in prison on the taxpayer dime. But the list goes on. He also commuted the sentence of Anthony Battle. Now, in 1994, Anthony Battle was already serving a life sentence when he killed a correctional officer who was only 31 years old by the name of D'Antonio Washington. And he killed him by bludgeoning him to death with a hammer. And when he was given a chance to apologize or show any kind of remorse, take some accountability, he said that the officer, quote, died like a dog. And the life sentence that Anthony Battle was already serving when he decided to add insult to injury, pile on top of it, well, that life sentence was for raping and murdering his own wife in 1987. She was a Marine, but the list goes on. Biden also decided to commute the sentence of Marvin Gabrion. Now, in 1997, Gabrion was facing trial for raping 19-year-old Rachel Tillerman. But before she could testify against him for this grape, he decided that he was going to kidnap her, tie her up, chain her to a cement block, and then throw her in a lake while she was still breathing. And he also murdered her 11-month-old baby, Shannon, because, quote, there was nowhere else to put it while he was murdering the mother. And he confessed to these killings. He's also the prime suspect in the disappearances and murders of several other people, including at least one person who was set to testify against him. Biden decided to commute the sentences of all of these men that I just mentioned to you. They were only a handful of the 37 out of 40 that he decided should not face execution. And why did he leave 3 out? Why did he choose 37 out of 40? Well, you probably haven't heard of any of the men that I just mentioned to you. You probably have long forgotten their cases, their names, if ever you heard of them at all. But you have probably heard of the Boston Marathon bomber. That's one man that Joe Biden left on death row. You probably also remember the racist mass murders of the Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina. The man who did that tragic mass murder, racist mass murder, Biden also left him on death row. You probably also remember the 2018 Tree of Life Synagogue mass murders in Pittsburgh, which remains to this day the largest anti-Semitic attack in U.S. history. Well, that's the third man that Joe Biden left on death row. Now, in 2021, the Biden administration enacted a moratorium on federal executions. But again, why absolve 37 out of the 40? If you're so against the death penalty, if you think we need to do away with it, if you think people have done their time, why only 37? Well, of course, Joe Biden or whoever was pulling his strings knew that he couldn't take off death row the man who's responsible for the racist mass murders in the 2015 Charleston, South Carolina church. He knew he couldn't do that, right? There would be public outrage. But he decides that these 37 other men who were convicted of brutal crimes and had senselessly and selfishly robbed victims of their lives, he decided that they don't deserve the death penalty, that they deserve to live out the rest of their lives in prison on the taxpayer dollar. He told the families of those victims the day before Christmas that they don't deserve justice, that the justice they thought they had is going to be ripped away from them because why? For what purpose? But then you leave 3 on death row who are very popular, who most of the public know, and you know that there would be a public outcry if you took these men off death row. I mean, the liberal hypocrisy knows no bounds, really. Again, this is Biden who swore to the American people that he wouldn't pardon his son Hunter if Hunter was convicted. And then here we have Biden, oh, I'm against the death penalty, but I'm only going to choose 37 out of the 40. In what I just said to you, how can you possibly look at degrees and go, oh, these murderers aren't as bad as those murderers? How? How can you do that in what I just said to you? I just named to you child rapists and murderers. As I wrap up here, Biden ran on ridding America of Donald Trump and restoring decency to the White House, but arguably he left the White House as the most lawless president in modern American history. And the fact of the matter is, no matter what you think about January 6, 2021 and Trump's action or inaction on that day and his response to the 2020 election, at the end of the day, the American people saw all of that In fact, they saw the worst of it. The media showed us the highlighted worst versions of it. And still, we the people chose Donald Trump for a second term to come back to the White House. So that's not Donald Trump's legacy. He's got 4 more years. He had the greatest comeback in political American history. It's not his legacy, but these pardons that happened in the last month, even the last hours of Joe Biden's presidency, these are his legacy. Joe Biden's presidential career is over. He's not coming back to the White House. His political career is over. You know, he's an older man. Probably a lot of things are over. This is his legacy. And he's going down in history as one of the most hypocritical, one of the most lawless presidents who absolutely abused his presidential powers. And I just have to ask what I've asked before, which is, do you think the Democrats are ever going to realize that if they're going to continually and incessantly claim the moral high ground, they have to actually behave in a moral fashion? They don't seem to have connected the dots there yet. So the next time a crazy progressive says to you, oh, how awful it is that Trump pardoned 1,500 January 6th defendants, including people who allegedly attacked cops. Well, first of all, no cops died on January 6th, 2021 at the Capitol. But second of all, show that person this video. Tell them about these cases, about how Joe Biden willfully pardoned people who intentionally shot and murdered cops, people who intentionally raped and murdered women and children. Talk about these cases, because no matter what you think about January 6th, everything I just said to you is far, far, far worse. But of course, it's not constantly played out in the media. It's not constantly posted on X. It's not constantly highlighted in the media. So we all forget about it. And the Democrats continue to remain hypocritical people with absolutely no moral compass, no consistent abiding principles. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. It's my intention to do more of these long form videos outside of my car, so let me know if you want to see a little bit more of these deep dives. I started off this way in 2021, but kind of moved away from it and started doing really short form content in my car, but I'd really like to get back to this. So let me know if it's something you'd like to see. Please leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe to this channel, and I will see you all again very soon.